There are certain things that soldiers are known for, some things that you're curious. Why do soldiers always do this? Why are soldiers known for that? And I've got a few that I want to explain. I'm U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos, and let me explain about some things that soldiers are kind of known for. What's up, my friends? Welcome to a brand new video. In this one, we're talking about some things that soldiers are known for, you've heard of soldiers doing. You may be curious as to why do they do these things. Some of them are okay types of things, some are kind of bad types of things, and I'm not trying to justify them doing it, but I'm trying to give you a little context as to why this is sometimes pretty common, especially in the United States Army. If you're interested in learning about the Army, to join, you're currently in, you're a veteran, you like the nostalgia, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, make sure you're hitting that bell, make sure you're checking out links down in the description box, make sure you're commenting, all that stuff. But nonetheless, let's dive into things and let's talk about this very first one. That being, you might see that soldiers like new things. That's new cars, new TVs, gaming systems, new clothes, new shoes, all sorts of things. It's a pretty common thing that you will see a lot of soldiers with new things. Cars, it can be a pretty big one. I remember I had a friend that liked coming on base all the time because they were talking about like, oh, it's nice to see all these nice cars. It seems like soldiers always have nice new cars compared to off-post or civilians kind of a thing. And there's a reason for that. One of the main reasons for cars, TVs, whatever kind of a thing is that mainly with single soldiers, this is a pretty common thing, they don't have a lot of bills. You're a single soldier, you live in the barracks, so you're not paying rent, you're not paying utilities, you're not paying for healthcare. If you want, you could be eating for free in the chow hall all the time and not having to pay any money for food. So single soldiers mainly, they don't have any bills. The bills they do have are usually pretty small. I mean, maybe it's a cell phone bill, maybe it's the internet in the barracks, and that leaves still a good chunk that they can use for buying new things. When you look at it on paper, yeah, it looks like soldiers don't make a lot of money, especially when you're looking at like the private first class individuals. But you also have to factor in there, they're also not paying rent. If you were a civilian working a civilian job, you have rent to pay unless you're just on plan to live with your parents forever. You also have utilities to pay. Soldiers don't have to do that. If you want healthcare insurance, that's pretty damn expensive, and soldiers have great healthcare insurance that they don't pay for. Nonetheless, all these things add up, and it makes it to where that paycheck that looks pretty small can be used for a lot of great things because you're not having to use it towards rent and all these other things that you normally would have in the civilian sector. So that often equals, hey, I can afford a $400, $500, $600 a month car payment. Now, a lot of times there are some soldiers that take that to the extreme, and yeah, if you're a brand new private, you should not be buying a really expensive car that has a pretty high car payment because, I mean, you still have to pay for car insurance and gas and maintenance on the car, so that can add up very quickly, so you don't want to be getting yourself into that situation. But some soldiers maybe have it managed a little bit better to where they can afford a nice car because maybe, you know, they've saved up some money, put a good down payment on, maybe they built up in rank a little bit and they can get a nice car, because you will still see, you know, the higher ranking individuals with really nice cars because they can afford the nice cars. But that goes the same for the TVs, right? They got this extra cash. I don't have to spend this paycheck on rent or anything like that because I don't have that. So I can go buy this $1,000 TV. You know, maybe they put it on a credit card, especially like the military star card, which is the military credit card. They rack it up on that credit card. Maybe they're responsible with it, maybe they're not. But nonetheless, that's sometimes an option that a lot of soldiers end up utilizing. Especially sometimes with cars. I mean, it makes it easy to where soldiers can pretty easily get qualified for a loan because of their military employment. They know it's a pretty steady paycheck. They know that they're probably not going to get fired. I mean, soldiers could potentially get fired, you know, getting kicked out of the Army for doing pretty bad things, but definitely not as easily as someone in the civilian sector. So, you know, car lots or, you know, dealerships or banks or whatever know this individual has a pretty steady income, and if they don't make the payments, they can contact their leadership and get the payment somehow. So sometimes it does equal a little bit easier of an opportunity for them to get loans, sometimes not a great interest rate loan, maybe, especially if they don't have very good credit, and sometimes dealerships take advantage of soldiers for those reasons, but nonetheless, it does make it easier for soldiers to end up doing so, to spend that extra money on a car payment. The next one is not a good one. Sadly to say, there is, in some areas of the United States, maybe even overseas too, soldiers do have a bad rep for using women. Meaning, you know, hooking up with women, you know, and then kind of just ghosting them, right? Disappearing, not really wanting to follow through with an actual relationship. They just wanted to hook up with them, and now the females start, you know, telling their friends that, hey, I hooked up with this soldier on base and I never heard from him again. Especially, I remember this like in Kansas. When I was stationed at Fort Riley and you had this college town nearby, there was a lot of like the college girls, they wanted to have nothing to do with Army guys because of this bad reputation they had. And yeah, there were guys that did this stuff. It wasn't a false accusation. Yeah, there are guys that do that. I mean, there's guys that do that probably in the civilian world too, but it might be, I don't know what the statistics are, but you know, there's a lot of reasons why soldiers might possibly do this a little bit more often than say someone you meet in the civilian world. So, I mean, one of them is just the obvious. They could be anyone, and it's just men are men, right? Sometimes men are pigs, and they just want to hook up with a girl and don't really want to be committed to it. They just wanted to have a good time for that night. It's sad, right? I'm sorry, you know, ladies out there, you know, that wanted a nice military man or whatever. But that's men in general. I mean, you might have found that with some guy who had a regular civilian job that was in college or whatever. If that person was like that in the military, they probably would have been like that in the civilian sector too. But there are other things that are a bit more military related, army related kind of a thing that does sometimes kind of lead to this as well. The main one that I usually can think of is trust issues, right? You hear a lot of stories, you know, when you're in the army about don't get married, don't begin these serious relationships because the girl is just gonna go cheat on you as soon as you go to the field, as soon as you get deployed. So it ends up with a bad reputation for that. So the women, civilian women, end up with a bad reputation through Army guys from all their buddies talking, you know, through experience and everything, or stories that they've heard. So they sometimes have a little bit of trust issues. They're like, well, I want to have a good time, I'm lonely and everything, but I don't really want to commit myself to a relationship because I'm worried that if I go and I fall deep for this person, they're going to cheat on me when I go to the field, they're not going to want to stay with me if I get deployed and I'm gone for a year, I'm going to possibly come on orders to get sent somewhere else and they're not going to want to continue a relationship. So they're afraid to kind of get serious about a relationship. So sometimes it does result in that. They just want to be not alone and still have a good time, you know, have a good night or whatever kind of a thing, but not get serious with that person because they're afraid of the possibility of them getting, you know, cheated on or just left. So sometimes the females end up with that bad rep because of those kind of things, because there are situations like that where, yeah, soldiers go off to the field and that female, you know, isn't maybe that all that kind of trustworthy kind of a thing, and she goes and hooks up with some other guy while her boyfriend's off in the field. And so now that has built a bad reputation for those individuals, those civilians, and soldiers don't really have good trust kind of issues or good trust kind of in those females that are going to be loyal to them. So they kind of don't want to put it all out there, and they end up, I guess, basically using women kind of in a way, or it at least comes off that way. I will say that I've seen some females that do use soldiers as well, so it's not like just a one-way thing. I have actually seen it before where you have these females that they want to hook up with soldiers because they know they have a steady income. They, you know, potentially can buy them nice things or whatever, and they're not really all that interested in a long-term relationship. They just want to find someone who's gullible, who will be excited to be in a relationship with a pretty girl and spoil them with, you know, great things because they, you know, don't have a lot of the bills they have to spend money on. So there are some things like that I've seen. I even remember meeting this one female when I was stationed in Fort Riley, Kansas, and she actually had a rank standard. She would not date anybody that was not an officer. So she would only date officers. So that, I mean, maybe it was for a good reason. Maybe she only wanted to date people that were college educated, but I kind of got the feeling that, you know, she wanted to date someone that made better money. So it's not just the guys. I mean, the females too. The females on the civilian side, maybe on the military side too. It's just not as common of a story that you hear about female soldiers using male civilians or male soldiers or whatever kind of thing. It's more commonly a thing you hear about men in the Army. Now, kind of related to, you know, with these dates kind of a thing, or, you know, trying to, you know, hook up with someone, maybe someone you met online, that does bring us to the sponsor of this video, which is Truthfinder. And this might be useful for some veterans out there, and maybe some people that are currently in the military, maybe even some people who are not in the military, but maybe, you know, some applications that this might kind of apply for. Truthfinder is a website you can go to. You can run background checks, not for employment purposes or anything, but for personal things. So maybe you do want to run a background on this person you met online. You met this person on the internet, you're going to go on a date with them. You want to make sure they don't have this big criminal record. You might be able to use this website to be able to run that background on that individual, or maybe on the opposite side, you're a civilian and you met a soldier and you want to run a background check on that person. There is other applications, such as maybe you're a veteran and you have some battle buddies from your Army days, or you have gotten stationed somewhere and you lost contact with some of your buddies from basic training. You can run a background check, look up their name, try to find like an email address, their social media, to be able to reach out to them and try to reconnect with them. Or maybe even your PCS to a new location. You want to find about the neighbors in your neighborhood, and you can do a background check based on address as well. You type in the address, find out who possibly lives there, find out about that person to see if they have some kind of criminal record, and see a little bit about your neighbors. So there's all sorts of kind of good possibilities that you can kind of use this for, to check on people, check on neighbors, all sorts of stuff, to run some background checks. Again, not for purposes of like employment types of things, but for personal things, for your personal safety, to make sure you're not getting into a relationship with someone that's, you know, got a horrible, you know, past kind of a thing, or whatever the case might be. Check out the link down below if you would like to check out the site, maybe sign up for membership and give them a try. Run a background check on your buddies and see what's going on. Now from there, let's get into the last one, and that one is probably one that you've heard quite often, and that is that soldiers drink a lot. This one I feel like could also be a thing with college students. It's kind of the same reasons why it happens with Army soldiers, military members, and maybe in general, but also college students as well. You're away from home and you are just free, right? You don't have your parents telling what you can and can't do. I mean, you kind of still have the Army telling you what you can and can't do, but not the same way your parents were. So you're free to have a good time, and that usually leads to partying. Maybe typically if you live still like in your hometown kind of a thing, you might be spending the weekends with family, going to do things together with family, and then spending a little bit of time with your friends type of thing. But when you're in the Army, you're away from that family, so you don't really have that kind of option. So your only option is to either do something by yourself or go do something with your friends, and a lot of times that does end up resulting in going to the club, drinking to the barracks, going to bars, whatever, and that does lead to a lot of soldiers do drink a lot. Not all soldiers. Some soldiers, you know, find other things to do, but I do often see that, you know, a lot of soldiers, that's what they want to do. They want to go party, they want to have a good time, and some people are responsible about it, but some people are not very responsible about it. It just really kind of depends on the individual, but that is a pretty common thing regardless. Some of it might even be stress related. Some of it might be a thing where they're stressed out about their job, they're stressed about a deployment coming up, they're stressed out about their leadership. Their leadership maybe isn't treating them very well, so to kind of relieve that stress, they want to go out drinking with their buddies. So the Army can be a stressful kind of a job, and sometimes to relieve that stress, that might be a resource that people might utilize, is using alcohol to kind of wash away that stress a little bit, and maybe take a little bit of break from it all and kind of just unwind or whatever. So yeah, I mean, drinking is a pretty big thing. I even had my phase that I went through in the Army for a while of, you know, drinking pretty much every weekend and going out and partying all the time, and some people take it even more extreme than that. For me, it was definitely because, you know, I'm not seeing family, I'm not doing anything with my family, so all I really have is my friends, and a lot of them want to go to the clubs. Sometimes it's strip clubs, sometimes it's regular clubs, sometimes it's regular bars, but it does ultimately usually end up involving, you know, going out and drinking and, you know, getting wasted and getting drunk and everything. Thankfully, I was always responsible. We always had it set up to where either we had somebody with us that was not a drinker that was going to go and be the driver for us, or we had a plan that we were going to use a taxi or whatever. So I never got in any trouble. My group of friends never got in any trouble. We were always pretty responsible. But yeah, for a good couple of years, that was probably my routine of every weekend going out to the club and partying and getting drunk every weekend. It was what actually ended up kind of ruining it for me, is when I deployed to Iraq. I deployed to Iraq, and you're not supposed to have alcohol. Sometimes people do, but while in Iraq, I didn't consume any alcohol, so I wasn't going out partying, drinking at all. And then when I came back from Iraq and we tried to kind of like get back into the flow of going to the clubs and partying and stuff like that, for whatever reason, it just wasn't the same, and I kind of just lost interest in drinking altogether. But some people pick it right back up, and that is a pretty common thing that soldiers are interested in, and they want to go out and they want to go drinking. On the topic of like combat deployment type of thing, there is some things you're not allowed to do on a combat deployment. People sometimes still do it, but nonetheless, they are things that are restricted that they're not supposed to do. And if you'd like to learn about those things, I do have a video right here that you can check out. Make sure you check out the links down in the description box down below for Truthfinder. Run a background check on your neighbors, your buddies, whatever you want to do. Check out other links down there. Hit that thumbs up. I'm Christopher Chaos, and I'll see you next time. See ya.